All right, this is Jeff Drew. Jeff, you come from a big civil rights family here. Dr. Martin Luther King used to come and stay with you on his trips to Birmingham as a child. You used to call him what, Uncle Mike?
Uncle Mike.
Uncle Mike, is
right,
right?
Right.
But you know, it's not really history I want to talk to you so much about today, but the present and the future in the context of all that history. And after Charleston, we have talked, I think, wondering why it's so hard for black people and white people to get on the same page today. Why is it so hard?
We're not thinking like Americans, John. We're not thinking like Americans. We must be Americans first. Then we can embrace our ethnic heritages. But until we think of ourselves as an American community, then we fuel all of this fragmentation, which is not good. Not good.
You've actually come out and said, you know, taking down the flags not only does not address the problem, but may actually make it worse. Is that what are you talking about there?
Well, for every who was it that said for every action there's an equal reaction, and taking down the flag is great for the oppressive nature that black people may associate with the Confederate flag, but it also destroys the symbol of history for Confederate soldiers and Confederate pride. You can't win by taking away that symbol of the flag and think that there's not going to be some undercurrent reaction. There is an undercurrent reaction. Whatever the black people may feel happy about, the white people are sad about. So it accomplishes nothing.
So, I mean, a lot of white people are feeling threatened by this whole action. Their culture is being wiped away and that sort of thing.
Their history.
You fear that that causes a backlash that makes things more difficult going forward?
Sure I do. Sure I do.
You'd rather see that flag flying?
Not necessarily that would I rather see the flag flying, but I would rather see the Confederates take their hand and reach across the aisle and meet their black counterparts.
Why is that so hard? And why is it so hard?
There's a fear. There's a fear. There's a cultural fear that is widening in this country. Blacks are afraid to interact, and white folks seem to be happy that we're not curious to interact, and therefore they don't choose to interact. And so the extremes continue to be 180 degrees apart. And as that continues, then the ability to find middle ground gets more and more difficult, further and further apart. And it's the middle ground that is the core of America. That's where we need to be. We need to be citizens first.
Well, how do you define extremist?
I define extremists by refusing to have any middle ground in your life, refusing to want to cross the line, to interact, refusing to be curious, to gain knowledge of other cultures and other people.
So there are white extremists, black extremists, Muslim extremists.
Exactly.
Democratic extremists,
right,
Republican
right. And in America, the United States of America, we should be united underneath our Constitution.
Well, I said I wasn't going to talk much history, but I have to ask you this. Dr. King used to come and stay with you, and you knew him well.
Right.
What would he say about where we are today?
When the girls were killed in Birmingham in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, Martin thought that nothing could be worse. There was no act of evil and hatred that could trump the 16th Street bombing church. If he saw what happened in Charleston 50 years later, it would kill him 100 times. He would not be able to stomach the fact that here, 50 years later, in the house of God, just like in Birmingham, death and evil could approach a church. He would be horrified, as I am.
Well, finally, one last thing. Are you more hopeful or more hopeless today than you were 2 weeks ago, and why?
The killing in Charleston has made my life shorter. No, I'm not as hopeful as I was. I'm afraid now. I have a new fear that is festering in my heart and my soul, because even when we have a black president, this is possible. And if that much hatred is still festering in this country, then I shudder to think what the future will be.